What's up guys, Coach Kane here, and my last video on James Toney was very well received, and a few people requested that I do another James Toney breakdown. So today we're going to look at one of my favorite fights from him, his fight with 1996 Olympic gold medalist and the professionally undefeated Vassiliy Jirov. The fight was for Jirov's IBF Cruiserweight title, and yet it had a pace closer to that of a welterweight fight due to Vassili's high-pressure game plan. The fight started with both fighters showing a lot of feints, and the first blows were scored by Jirov via a few glancing lead hooks to Toney's head. Toney began establishing his jab, and made a slight adjustment in his Philly shell defense to better employ his lead shoulder in defending against the lead hook from Jirov. Toney started looking to take the outside foot position that's so important for setting up the rear hand against a southpaw. He did this by double jabbing his way in, with the expectation that Vassiliy would dip forward by bending at the waist. So Toney was looking to catch him where he was going, rather than where he was, by throwing the right hand at more of a chest level. Knowing that Jirov was throwing common jab-cross-hook combinations, Toney was able to quickly adjust his defense, first pulling the jab, slipping the left hand, and moving in to smother the lead hook of Jirov. By throwing his cross at chest level, Toney was likely to land to the body should Jirov decide not to bend at the waist, making for a 2-for-1 opportunity in favor of Toney. Much of Vassili's combination punching consisted of pawing shots, rather than cleanly defined straights, hooks, and uppercuts, which further decreased their effectiveness as Toney's constant slipping, dipping, and shoulder rolling prevented them from landing flush on their target. Meanwhile, Toney's punches and techniques showed precision as usual, like this sequence where he jabs, slips the counter jab from Jirov to the inside, and comes back with a solid rear hand counter. After an exchange, Toney would walk off, enticing Jirov to follow. Toney would then use hand and footwork feints, causing hesitancy in Vassili's offense, which allowed Toney to get off first with his darting 1-2 combos. Incorporating the use of the ring and feints this way gave Toney the ability to significantly reduce the work rate of Jirov. This, combined with patience during the exchanges, allowed him to land the cleaner punches that would back Vassiliy off from his attacks. Toney's mastery of inside fighting techniques meant that he was able to throw much shorter and tighter shots. And one of the major adjustments he made to his usual Philly shell defensive patterns was to use the lead shoulder to pick off the jabs and lead hooks from Vassiliy, where normally it's used to pick off right crosses from orthodox fighters. Toney also showed something I call the opposite rule of southpaw to orthodox situations, where generally countering the lead hand of the southpaw with the rear hand from orthodox is ideal. The vice versa of this rule also applies. If the southpaw throws a rear hand, then the lead hand from orthodox is generally ideal. This general rule of thumb not only allows you to more easily achieve the outside foot position when countering rear hand to lead, but also helps prevent the all-too-common headbutt that often occurs when an orthodox and southpaw fighter both reach in with their rear hands at the same time. During the break between rounds 1 and 2, Freddie Roach asked James to use the jab more, and to not counter with just one punch at a time, but rather bring the lead hook behind the right hand in combination. Harold Letterman gave James Toney the first round, but Jirov came on extremely strong in the second, and after getting caught with the right hand from a nice double jab cross combo, he pressed James to the ropes and put some heavy pressure on him. This is where the judging criteria of effective aggression becomes very important to consider. Although Vassiliy has James to the ropes, he's clearly putting in a lot more effort than the value he's getting out of this type of exchange warrants. Despite the heavy pressure, he only scores a few glancing blows for his efforts. And after backing off, Toney is the one who scores using the same fundamental 1-2 combo that he had success with in the first round. Out in center ring, Jirov landed a left hand to the belt line that probably would have put Alexander Usyk on the canvas, and even lands a decent left hook to the head of Toney. Vassiliy mounted another high-pressure onslaught, and in the process of pushing Toney to the ropes again, was able to bump him and create space for his lead hook to finally land flush. Jirov did better when staying at slightly longer range when having Toney pinned to the ropes. He was able to touch Toney with the jab, touch his body with the lead hook, and get a nice 2-3 combo into the head. The slightly longer range led to a much more effective type of exchange for Jirov. He was able to keep Toney guessing while being just out of range for Toney's short inside shots, and just a bit too close for Toney to commit to the sharp 1-2s he had been landing. The moment Vassiliy would fall back out of his sweet spot, Toney would make him pay with the rear hand straight, again catching him as he would bend over. Toney soon made another adjustment, this time by picking up his hand speed with a shoe shine to Jirov's body, finishing to the head with a lead hook. This matching of intensity is one of Toney's most effective tools for nullifying a pressure fighter like Vassiliy. After making that adjustment, James found one of the most effective counterpunches of the whole fight. After making Vassiliy miss the lead hook to the head, Toney would counter with a rear uppercut as Jirov tried to recover from the missed shot. And in this final exchange of the round, despite the mauling the Tiger was attempting to put on him, James was able to land in between the punches of Jirov and ultimately held his own in one of Vassili's best rounds of the fight, which went to him on the Letterman card and likely all 3 of the official cards as well. Despite coming off of a massive 14-month layoff, by the end of the second round, Jirov averaged a staggering 90 punches per round. The third began with Jirov initiating the clinch and landing some short stabbing left hands to the head of Toney as he pushed him to the ropes, and it looked like it would be a continuation of the success he had in the second until he landed an egregious low blow on Toney, which warranted a 5-minute rest period from Steve Smoker. Toney only took about 40 seconds of his time before coming out with a vengeance, pulling a jab from Jirov and landing a devastating 1-2 combo. Toney showcased more of his amazing head movement with back-to-back slips for Jirov's double jab. He threw a couple of rear hands from underneath before stepping in with another strong 1-2, catching Jirov bending over yet again. He then ducked under the left hook from Vassiliy, causing Jirov to throw downward at him with that pawing right hand, allowing him to simply stand back up to make it miss, before immediately ducking again, causing Jirov to throw himself off balance with another left hook. Toney capitalized on this by leaping in with a lead hook and landed a rear uppercut to the head as well as a lead hook to the body. Shortly after, James slips Vassiliy's jab to the inside and counters with a precision right hand yet again. Toney finished the third by finally adding the lead hook behind the right hand, which caught Jirov standing up from the duck position. James outlanded Jirov 36-12 in the third, and finished the round with a +20 ± rating. Toney has a tendency to casually walk away from his opponents while watching them out of the corner of his eye, making it difficult to know what his intentions are in the moment. And this time he turned his walk into a jab cross combo. It's a slick way of lulling his opponents to sleep in the moment. It also lets him attack from an angle in an unexpected fashion. The fourth was somewhat of a rest round for both Toney and Jirov, but Toney continued to land great shots, doubling up the hook to the body and to the head from off the ropes. Toney showed how important it is to move after missing a punch, never dwelling on a missed opportunity, but rather staying defensively responsible at all times. Look at the way that dipping down causes Jirov to throw down at Toney, and how much reach is lost by him doing this. This is where it's important to have a good knowledge of the proper punch selections for specific situations. An uppercut from either hand would have been a much better choice than trying to throw down at him, and could have been used to lift him back up directly into a hook or straight punch. Oftentimes boxers will try to pull the uppercut by standing up from the duck position, and doubling up by turning the uppercut over directly into a straight is a great way of catching them on the way up. Once again, the best punch of the round was a right hand from James Toney. The fifth was back to a much higher pace, and in the first exchange of the round, Toney showcased one of my favorite methods for recovering from a missed punch. As he misses with the lead hand, he steps through with his rear foot to catch his balance, and immediately uses the momentum of retrieving his lead hand to quickly turn an angle, recovering his stance while simultaneously loading himself to spring directly into a lead hook, which Jirov was luckily able to parry. Toney then employed a reverse shift, switching from orthodox by stepping his lead foot back into a southpaw position, which caused Jirov to miss the jab to the body and created a ton of room. He then used his casual walk to get to a new angle before coming back with the double jab and landing a nice cross to the head. Shots like these show how important it is to keep your chin tucked in boxing. It causes the punches to land on the forehead where they do less damage, and slide down your face rather than snapping the head back for the judges to clearly see. But when you're in the ring with James Toney, who knows that an uppercut is the perfect punch selection to negate that, you're in for a long night. Jirov leans over and catches one flush to center face. Those are the shots that make your nose bleed and your eyes swell shut. In this exchange, we see Toney counter Jirov's rear uppercut with a lead hook. The weight transfer of throwing the lead hook means that your head should be to the right of your center line for an orthodox fighter, so it basically creates a built-in slip when thrown properly, which is what causes Jirov to miss his uppercut and allows Toney to land the hook at the same time. In the final exchange of the fifth, Toney beats Jirov to the punch as they both attempt to land hooks to the head, and Toney lands a solid rear hook after being clipped ever so slightly with a jab from Jirov. In the start of the sixth, Toney started strong, countering Jirov's missed hook with the rear uppercut, blocking the left to the body from Vassiliy and coming back with another uppercut with a nice hook behind it. Freddie Roach had been asking James to back Jirov up, and he was finally beginning to have success doing that in the first minute of the sixth, pushing Jirov back with stiff jabs. But by the second minute, he would fall back into fighting off of the ropes where he felt comfortable. Again, Toney would block the left hook to the body, but this time came back with a chopping right hook that temporarily backed Jirov up. As Jirov pressed back into the pocket, Toney tagged him with a short and tight left hook, before waving him directly into a straight right hand that snapped his head back. He touched Jirov with the jab and then turned it over into a hook, and countered Jirov's jab with another straight right hand. He'd counter the lead hand of Jirov again by landing one more jolting rear uppercut before taking a walk to slow the action. Toney took a nice hook from Vassiliy but got one back of his own, and then showed that slick bump turn to recover that I mentioned before yet again. Toney continued to egg Jirov on, walking him into a solid 1-2 combo. Then Toney doubled his rear hook and got one back from Jirov. James landed a series of chopping rear hooks to the head of Jirov in the last 30 seconds of the 6th, and the bad blood was beginning to boil with the stare down at the end of the round. Toney outlanded Jirov 34-17, having crept up past 50% punch accuracy in the round. Despite Toney's insane accuracy, Harold Lederman had Jirov winning the 6th, and it was back to even on his card. Toney came out in the 7th landing his bread and butter double jab 2, and rattled Jirov's head with tight back-to-back hooks, slipped outside his jab and countered with the lead hook to the body. Jirov scored a similar series of hooks, pushing Toney to the ropes, trapped his lead hand in the clinch, and got some work in with the rear, before landing another uppercut and hook combo. A really good series for Vassiliy. Toney slipped in a nice lead hook before circling out right back to center ring. From there, James pressed Vassiliy back by shifting into a southpaw stance and battering him with a series of left hooks. Toney finished the round by doubling up the lead hook from southpaw to the body and the head, and reverse shifting back into orthodox, catching Jirov with the lead hook from the new stance. The 8th would prove to be an extremely important round in terms of the scoring. Toney would land a solid rear uppercut, but immediately get hit with a low blow that prompted Steve Smoger to take a point from Vassiliy. In the process, Smoger forgot to call time during the 30 seconds or so that Toney was resting, eating up a large portion of the round to Toney's favor. Toney spent another 30 seconds or so on defense before finally popping Jirov with a nice right hand. Here we see Toney land a rear uppercut, wedge block the left hook to the head from Vassiliy, and counter inside of it with a nice straight right. From the ropes, Toney dropped a solid overhand left on Jirov. Again working from southpaw, Toney traded lead hooks with Vassiliy and seemed to get the better of it. Jirov glanced a lead hand off Toney's shoulder and caught a perfect straight right to center face. Toney put the uppercut and hook together, sending sweat flying from Jirov's head. After drawing him back out to center ring, Toney landed another great right hand that he seemed to think hurt Jirov, as he rushed to step back in, landing a nice uppercut in the process. Taking another look at it from the slow-mo replay between rounds, you can really see how effortless Toney's power is, and how accuracy leads to better punching power. With just 15 seconds left to go in the 8th, Toney landed a lead hook that staggered Jirov, and I think was the first time that he was significantly hurt in the fight, giving a sign of what was to come in the final round. Toney caught Vassiliy falling in with a right hand, but immediately after was clipped with a fantastic 3-piece combination. At the halfway point of the 9th round, they traded some of the best and most competitive exchanges of the entire fight. Jirov continued to make it a grueling inside fight by pressing on Toney, beating on his arms and shoulders to create openings to the head and body, even using his own head, in a subtle yet dirty fashion, to bull Toney around. Despite the insane work rate from Vassiliy, Toney continued to land the cleaner and more effective punches, ultimately outlanding Jirov 28-18 in the process, making it a tough fight to judge. The pressure of Vassiliy Jirov or the precision of James Toney. By the 10th round, the damage on Vassili's face was really beginning to show. Regardless of the pace and the 14-month layoff, he still refused to take a seat on the stool between rounds. But this round, he would finally begin to show some serious fatigue, lacking any snap in his punches. Toney found an opportunity to slip to his left and pivot out off the ropes into southpaw, where he caught Vassiliy with a lead hook that backed him up, placing him off the end of Toney's left foot, allowing him to throw a devastating rear uppercut from orthodox in a masterful display of switch hitting. As he threw the uppercut, he stepped through and used the bump turn from before to load up a nasty lead hook. He continued the onslaught, landing hooks, straight rights, and more uppercuts, putting Vassiliy Jirov in serious trouble. But being a seasoned professional, Toney didn't try to force the knockout, but instead went back to the ropes where he could easily land between the punches of Jirov with sharp counterpunches, which worked perfectly as he was able to stagger Vassiliy yet again with a chopping right hook just before the bell. Despite throwing a fight high of 104 punches, Jirov only landed 15, with a fight low connect rate of just 14%. On the other hand, Toney landed 44 out of 77 for a fight high 57% connect rate. Jirov started the 11th extremely well. He seemed to have a second wind and pressed Toney with a series of flurries on the ropes, and was even able to dip a few shots from Toney in center ring. At the halfway point, Toney began to turn it around when he landed a nice rear uppercut that caused Jirov to let him off the ropes, where Toney was able to triple jab, land the cross, as well as a series of hooks to the head and body. Toney drew back to the ropes again, and landed a smashing rear hook, rear uppercut, and lead hook combo. Jirov was putting on an amazing display of will with each flurry, but couldn't stop Toney from landing between his shots. Toney closed out the 11th with more of the same precision counterpunching that carried him throughout the fight up until this point. Take a listen to Freddie's final words of advice to Toney between rounds, and Toney's hilarious reaction to Freddie's words of wisdom.
Alright, championship of the world right here, this round, okay? You gotta put this guy on his ass. I'm serious now, okay? Alright? He out-hustled you that round. You don't let him out-hustle you.
Come on, baby.
Okay.
Harold Letterman had Toney down 2 going into the 12th, meaning he'd need the knockdown Freddie was asking for just to score a draw. The punch stats through round 11 were 229 out of a staggering 950 thrown for Vassiliy Jirov for a 24% connect rate, and 338 out of 730 for James Toney, landing at a 46% clip. This round would prove to be one of the best and most dramatic final rounds of recent boxing history, as Toney continued to fight off the ropes and land stunning shots. He eventually found a home for a right hand that sent Jirov leaning like the Tower of Pisa, connecting with several more that kept the momentum going in his favor. Toney continued blasting Jirov with punches from every angle imaginable, culminating in a double left hook to the body and then the head. A right hook, another left, and finally a lead hook from southpaw from an angle where Jirov never saw it coming from, putting Jirov down and solidifying the victory for Toney. By the time Jirov was back on his feet and back in center ring, the final bell had rung. James Toney is easily one of my top 5 favorite fighters of all time, and this is one of my favorite performances of his. So many people doubted his stamina due to his less than ideal lifestyle outside of the ring, but he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he could withstand even the most grueling of paces and come out on top. The decision went to Toney unanimously, with the scorecards reading 117-109, 116-110, and again 117-109, making the Letterman card look as though he was seeing a completely different fight. I'll leave you guys with 2 questions. How did you have it scored, and where does James Toney rank on your all-time favorites list? I put a ton of work into this one, and I really hope you guys enjoy it. And if you did, I would greatly appreciate a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns like this one. Peace, guys.